definitely going to take a little while, this portion. All right. I think, Mom, what we'll do is you and me, because I barely had a reading. I had like one chapter. Yeah. So you and I will kind of split up the first three chapters here. Okay. All right. So shalom, everyone. Brother Doug, again, with the Waken by Yahuwah Assembly, and we're back on. So let me just get the recording to the cloud, and me and my mom are going to split up. My mom and I are going to split up this portion here. I think what we're going to do is I'll do 7 and 8. You can do 9 and 10, Mom, and then we can give Brother Joshua like the last 2 chapters of the portion. Mm-hmm. And then we'll pick another reader for the other prophet books that we have. All right, so all right, here we go. And I'm going to be using the word software again. So here we go. All right. I think Dennis just got in. All right. Here we go. Right. Okay, so here we go. For those that just joined, we just did the Torah portion of Deuteronomy 30. Now we're going to Hosea. My mom and I are splitting up the first couple of chapters of Hosea, and then Brother Joshua will be finishing it up in the last 2 chapters. So here we go. All right, so I'll try to put this on a compare view here again. Let me see here. I'll purposely use the ISR for the Masoretic because usually the ISR is very pro-Masoretic to compare between that and the Septuagint. All right, here we go. Hosea chapter 7. When I have made whole Yasharal, then shall the lawlessness of Ephraim be revealed, and the wickedness of Samaria. And that's a whole nother topic, but I really believe the Samaritans literally were the house of Israel in the New Testament time period. This is one of the things in the Tanakh that seem to point to it, that it's calling the capital of Ephraim Samaria. For they have worked falsehood, and a thief shall come into him, a robber spoiling in his way, that they may concert together as sinning in their heart. I remember all their wickedness. Now have their own counsels surrounded them about. They came before my face. They gladdened kings with their wickedness. This kind of reminds me of what's going to happen with the beast in Daniel, where it talks about a people, he's going to, make a covenant by flatteries with wicked people. And they're gonna do boastfully against the law and transgress the law and all that. Yeah. So they gladden kings with their wickedness and princes with their lies. They are all adulterers, as an oven glowing with flame for hot baking, an account of the kneading of the dough until it is leavened. The days of our kings, the princes began to be inflamed with wine. He stretched out his hand with pestilent fellows. Wherefore their hearts are inflamed as an oven. While they rage all the night, Ephraim is satisfied with sleep. The morning has come. He is burnt up as a flame of fire. They are all heated like an oven and have devoured their right rulers. All their canes are fallen. There was not one among them that called on me. Now, what's interesting here is the ISR. I don't know if this is just the English translation, but they're wording it like it's present tense, where in the Septuagint's past tense. They never called on him versus calls. Mm-hmm. So little different past versus present tense there, if that's the case. Ephraim is mixed among his people. So this is what's interesting here. The ISR, and I actually looked this up in the week, the way certain translators translate this is very disingenuous. They make you think that this is talking about Ephraim, basically genetically mixing him with the Gentiles. But if you actually look at the word for peoples, it's not Gentiles. So it's just the way it's translated in certain modern versions. It's very dishonest. If you look at the Septuagint, it's very clear. It's not talking about him being mixed physically with other people. or intermarrying with the Gentiles. It's actually, the Septuagint words it as, Ephraim is mixed among his people. Ephraim became a cake, not turned. So it's in the Septuagint's making it clear it's not talking about intermarriage. It's talking about he's mixed among his own people, his own, descendants. Okay, strangers devoured his strength and he knew it not. Gray hairs came upon him and he knew it not. And the pride of Yasharel shall be brought down before his face, yet they have not returned to Yahuwah their Elohim, neither have they diligently, I find this interesting, the Masoretic leaves that word out, diligently sought him for all this. Right. So, you'll see sometimes where it seems like Yasharel is repenting, Yehuda is repenting, and I think it's interesting. Yahuwah says they have not diligently sought him. So there seems to be a half-heartedness that Yahuwah is hinting to in the Septuagint, that the Masoretic leaves that word out. So you think that they never sought him at all on any level, even on a half donkey way, we could say,
Got it.
So Ephraim was as a silly dove, not having a heart. He called to Egypt and they went to the Assyrians. So this seems to be referring to the Assyrian captivity mixed in with when they willfully went back to Egypt, which it seems like there's two different captivities that went back to Egypt in the time of the prophets. You have the Assyrian captivity, they willfully on their own went back to Egypt. And then the house of Yehuda did it in the book of Ezekiel later on. So it's like, it's weird. It's like both of them wanted to go back to Egypt in a wicked way. They of their own fruition went back to Egypt. So I was mentioning this when we were talking about the curses last week and how some people are being disingenuous about the fulfillments of that and all that. Okay. So clearly, the going back to Egypt, you could either make a case for the Assyrian captivity or even the Babylonian captivity. They both went back to Egypt. So I'm just saying, whenever they shall go, I will cast my net upon them. I will bring them down as the birds of the sky. I will chasten them with the rumor of their coming affliction. Wow, this is really different. Chastise them as their congregation has heard. Wow. That's got to be a translation error. I'll give the Masoretic the benefit of the doubt. It shouldn't be that much of a disparagement there. That could be a translator error. As their congregation has heard. I don't know. That doesn't even make sense with the verse. Woe to them, for they have started aside from me, or strayed aside from me, I should say. They are cowards, for they have sinned against me. Yet I redeemed them, but they spoke falsehoods against me. And their hearts did not cry to me, but they howled on their beds. That's kind of funny, because supposedly the Hebrew for some of them mourning is, or the name Halel can mean like boisterous one, or the howling mourning. So I kind of find that funny. They howled on their beds, the Septuagint says. They pined for oil and wine. So, like kind of how back in the day, Yahuwah brings them, before he brings them into the land, he tests them with hunger. And they're like, oh, I want the cucumbers. I want this. I want that. It's kind of like that type of thing. They were instructed by me and I strengthened their arms, and they devised evils against me. They turned aside so that which is turn aside to that which is not, meaning they went for idols and made them deities, which they're not. They became as a bent bow. Their princes shall fall by the sword by reason of the unbridled state of their tongue. This is their setting at naught in the land of Egypt. So again, it's talking about the Assyrian captivity, went back to Egypt. All right, so before we go to chapter 8, I think Brother Joshua has something he wants to add. Go ahead, bro.
So verse 14, their hearts do not cry to me, but only make moans on their beds. For corn and wine, they were deeply affected. Would you say that that is saying that they're only calling on him when they need something?
Yeah, I would say that. It's kind of funny. Christian pastors have made that same recollection that and they kind of they say it in a derogatory way though, and in kind of self-righteous way. They'll try to portray Israel like so bad to the point where they're like, yeah, see, they only called on him when they needed something.
As if we don't do the same.
Like they got like a self-righteous attitude, which I don't like. Yeah. Like you wouldn't do the same if you're in their position. You wouldn't do the same. Like you're so high and mighty, you're not going to mess up and only call on him when you need him. I mean, that's the natural fleshy human inclination.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't make an assumption that I'm better than them, that I wouldn't be selfish like that from time to time. So that seems to be what Yahuwah has against them, is that, like you just mentioned in verse 14, is that it seems like the biggest problem with Yahuwah's people is we don't ever want to pray to him, praise him, seek him out until we're in like devastation mode.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he's sick of it. Also, I think it could be referring to their, like I said, it could be the lusting after it too.
Mm-hmm.
Could be the they looked at Yahuwah as just like this provider that, I'm only gonna talk to him when I need something, and possibly that's why they started mixing the worship with Yahuwah and Baal, and they started thinking Baal gave them the corn and the wine, because all they thought of Yahuwah from time to time was this guy that provides for them. They had no real knowledge of who Yahuwah's character really was in the time of the prophets. They just kind of looked at him like a meal ticket in a way. It's like weird. It's like, so we see later on in the book of Hosea where he said, Yahuwah even referencing the corn and wine again, he says, they did not know I was the one who gave them the corn and the wine. So you kind of see like the context later on in this book. Let's see here. So chapter 8, he shall come in their midst as the land, as an eagle. Okay. So now it's talking about the eagle, Deuteronomy 32. Okay. All right, against the house of Yahuwah, because they have transgressed my covenant and have sinned against my law. So to me, this is at the minimum, a partial fulfillment about where in Deuteronomy talks about these curses, and it says, I will bring an eagle-like nation against you. The Syrian captivity seems to be at the minimum a partial fulfillment of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have transgressed my covenant and have sinned against my law. They shall soon cry out to me, saying, "Oh, Elohim, we know you." See, here we go with they don't really know him. They think they know him, but they really don't.
Mm-hmm.
For Yasharal has turned away from Tob things. They have pursued an enemy. They have made kings for themselves. Here we go. This is so it's even showing that they neglected what Deuteronomy 17 says. They made kings for themselves, but not by me. They have ruled, but they did not make it known to me. Right, of their silver, of their gold. Remember how the Torah says, he shall not multiply his gold and his silver. He shall not greatly multiply his wives to make him go astray. Mm-hmm. So he's referencing that commandment here in verse 4. And their gold, they have not made images to themselves that they might be destroyed. Mm-hmm. Cast off your calf, O Samaria. So now he's calling the northern house Samaria here. My anger is kindled against them. How long will they be unable to purge themselves in Yasharal? Mm-hmm. This seems to also be a link to the story of Jeroboam. I think Yahuwah is also linking back to that initial sin where he made the 2 golden calves. That's why he's talking about the calf of Samaria. Mm-hmm. Seeing the workmen made it, and it's not Elohim. For your calf, O Samaria, was a deceiver. For they sowed blighted seed, and their destruction shall await them, a sheaf of grain that avails not to make a meal. Even if it should produce it, strangers shall devour it. Yasharal is swallowed up. Now he has become among the nations as a worthless vessel. For they have gone up to the Assyrians. Ephraim has been strengthened against himself. They loved gifts. What's weird is that the way the ISR puts it, you don't really get the idea that it's talking about loving gifts or partiality. It says they have hired lovers. Mm-hmm. Like, what? I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully that's a translator issue. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense in the context of that verse. But anyway, therefore they be delivered to the nations. Now I will receive them, and they shall cease a little to anoint a king and princes. Now, obviously, I think this is foreshadowing the Melchizedek priesthood we're in now, where there is no king, there is no sacrifices, there's no altars there, so that's my opinion on that in verse 10. That seems to be foreshadowing the transition period that we're in right now, where we don't have certain things because we're in a heavenly priesthood that Yahushua is the priest of. So that's my opinion on that. Because Ephraim has multiplied altars, his beloved altars have become sins to him. I will write down a multitude of commands for him, but his statutes are accounted strange things, even the beloved altars. What's interesting here is the Septuagint doesn't word it as it's referring to Yahuwah's statutes as weird, but as Ephraim's statutes, which is kind of interesting because there are other verses in Hosea that talk about Ephraim adopted the laws of the Gentiles. So I kind of wonder if the Septuagint's referring to that as his statutes are accounted strange things, even the beloved altars. And how Ephraim multiplied his own altars. For if they should offer a sacrifice and eat flesh, Yahuwah will not accept them. Now will he remember their lawlessnesses and will take vengeance on their sins. And they have returned to Egypt. So this is the fourth time they're telling you that this is a fulfillment here. They have returned to Egypt, and they shall eat unclean things among the Assyrians. Wow, this is interesting. The Masoretic completely leaves out, they will eat unclean things among the Assyrians. Wonder why they would leave that out. That's kind of strange. Okay. And Yasharal has forgotten him that made him. They have built palaces, and Yehuda has multiplied walled cities, but I will send fire on his cities, and it shall devour their foundations. All right. So now my mom will be taking over for chapters 9 and 10.
Okay. Do not rejoice, O Yashrael. Do not be jubilant like the other nations. For you have been unfaithful to your Elohim. You love the wages of a prostitute at every threshing floor. Threshing floors and wine presses will not feed the people. The new wine will fail them. They will not remain in Yahuwah's land. Ephraim will return to Egypt and eat unclean food in Assyria. They will not pour out wine offerings to Yahuwah, nor will their sacrifices please him. Such sacrifices will be to them like the bread of mourners. All who eat them will be unclean. This food will be for themselves. It will not come into the temple of Yahuwah. What will you do on the day of your appointed feasts, on the festival days of Yahuwah? Even if they escape from destruction, Egypt will gather them, and Memphis will bury them. Their treasures of silver will be taken over by briars, and thorns will overrun their tents. The day of punishment is coming, and the days of reckoning are at hand. Let Yasrael know this. Because your sins are so many, and your hostility so great, the prophet is considered a fool, the inspired man a maniac. The prophet, along with my Elohim, is the watchman over Ephraim. Yet snares await him on all his paths, and hostility in the house of his Elohim. They have sunk deep into corruption, as in the days of Gibeah. Yahuwah will remember their wickedness and punish them for their sins. When I found Yashrael, it was like finding grapes in the desert. When I saw your fathers, it was like seeing the early fruit on the fig tree. But when they came to Baal Peor, they consecrated themselves to that shameful idol and became as vile as the thing they loved. Ephraim's splendor will fly away like a bird. no birth, no pregnancy, no conception. Even if they rear children, I will bereave them of every one. Woe to them when I turn away from them. I have seen Ephraim like Tyre, planted in a pleasant place. But Ephraim will bring out their children to the slayer. Give them, O Yahuwah, what will you give them? Give them wombs that miscarry and breasts that are dry. Because of all their wickedness in Gilgal, I hated them there. Because of their sinful deeds, I will drive them out of my house. I will no longer love them. All their leaders are rebellious. Ephraim is blighted, their root is withered. They yield no fruit. Even if they bear children, I will slay their cherished offspring. My Elohim will reject them because they have not obeyed him. They will be wanderers among the nations. Okay, we're going to go on to 10. 1 second. All right. Okay, chapter 10. Yashrael was a spreading vine. He brought forth fruit for himself as his fruit increased. He built more altars as his land prospered. He adorned his sacred stones. Their heart is deceitful, and now they must bear their guilt. Yahuwah will demolish their altars and destroy their sacred stones. Then they will say, we have no king because we did not revere Yahuwah. But even if we had a king, what could he do for us? They make many promises, take false oaths, and make agreements. Sound familiar? Therefore, lawsuits spring up like poisonous weeds in a plowed field. The people who live in Samaria fear for the calf idol of Beth Aven. Its people will mourn over it, and so will its idolatrous priests, those who had rejoiced over its splendor, because it is taken from them into exile. It will be carried to Assyria as tribute for the great king. Ephraim will be disgraced. Yashrael will be ashamed of its wooden idols. Samaria and its kings will float away like a twig on the surface of the waters. The high places of wickedness will be destroyed. It is the sin of Yashrael. Thorns and thistles will grow up and cover their altars. Then they will say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. Since the days of Gibeah, you have sinned, O Yashrael, and there you have remained. Did not war overtake the evildoers in Gibeah? When I please, I will punish them. Nations will be gathered against them to put them in bonds for their double sin. Ephraim is a trained heifer that loves to thresh. So I will put a yoke on her fair neck. I will drive Ephraim. Yehudah must plow, and Yaakov must break up the ground. Sow for yourselves righteousness. Reap the fruit of unfailing love, and break up your unplowed ground. For it is time to seek Yahuwah until he comes and showers righteousness on you. But you have planted wickedness. You have reaped evil. You have eaten the fruit of deception because you have depended on your own strength and on your many warriors. The roar of battle will rise against your people, so that all your fortresses will be devastated. As Shalman devastated Beth Arbel on the day of battle, when mourners were dashed to the ground with their children, thus will it happen to you, O Bethel, because your wickedness is great. When that day dawns, the king of Yashrael will be completely destroyed.
I'm on 11 and 12, right?
Yep.
Okay. Real quick though, in 10:12, it says the Scriptures 1998 has a interesting footnote. It says the verse says, "Sow for yourselves righteousness, reap according to kindness. Break up your tillable ground. It is time to seek Yahuwah till he comes and rains righteousness on you." The Septuagint says talks about bearing the fruit of righteousness, but the Scriptures 98 has a footnote that says that the figurative meaning of rain is to teach.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, but so in chapter 11, I'm going to be reading from I really like this translation. Some of it's older English, so some of it's harder to understand, but I really enjoy the way it reads. It's the Charles Thompson Septuagint, which I just recently found. But early in the morning, they had been rejected. The king of Yashral is cast off. When Yashral was young, I loved him, and I called his children out of Mitzrayim. The more I called them, the more they ran from my presence. They sacrificed to the Baalim and burned incense to graven images. Therefore I bound Ephraim's feet. I took him up in my arms. When they did not know that I heal by the destruction of men, I bound them with the cords of my love. Now I will be to them as a man who slaps his cheeks, and I will keep an eye upon him and exercise authority over him. Ephraim dwelt in Mitzrayim through Assur, though Assur was his king. Because he refused to return, he was weakened in his cities by the sword, and it caused him to rest with his hands, and they shall eat the fruit of their devices. His people are indeed in imminent danger of being removed from their dwelling. Will Yahuwah be provoked against his honor so as never to exalt him? What shall I do with you, Ephraim? Shall I shield you, Yasharal? What must I do with you? Shall I make you as Adama and as Seboim? My heart relents for him. My compassion is moved. I will not act according to the fierceness of mine indignation. I will not give up Ephraim to utter destruction. For I am Yahuwah and am not man, the set apart one in the midst of you. Am I then not to enter a city? Am I to follow Yahuwah? Will he roar like a lion? And because of his roaring, will the children of waters be affrighted? They shall be frighted like a bird out of Mitzrayim, and like a dove out of the land of the Assyrians. And I will bring them back to their own homes, says Yahuwah. Ephraim encompassed me with a lie, and the house of Yashral and Yehuda with impieties. Now Yahuwah had acknowledged them, and they were to be called the set-apart people of Yahuwah. Hosea Chapter 12. But this Ephraim is an evil ruach. He pursued a blasting wind the whole day. He multiplied emptiness and vanity. Though he made a covenant with the Assyrians, yet oil went continually to Mitzrayim. With Yehuda also Yahuwah has controversy. To vindicate Yaakov, he will retribute to him, according to his ways and according to his devices. In the womb, Yaakov kicked his brother, but in his troubles he wrestled with Yahuwah. He indeed wrestled with Amalek and prevailed. I want to see if that word "and" is there. If it just says he wrestled with the Amalek. Give me a second. Okay, yeah, it should just, the word "and" is not there. It's just with, and he grew in strength with Malak, and he prevailed. So I'm guessing that should be the Malak, not a Malak. He indeed wrestled with the Malak and prevailed. Have they wept, or have they supplicated me? Have they found me in the house of On, or have they been spoken to there? Yahuwah Aluah Almighty was to be his memorial. To your Aluah, therefore, you are to return. Keep mercy and judgment, and draw near to your Aluah continually. As for Canaan, in his hand is a deceitful balance. He loved to tyrannize. Ephraim indeed said, but I am rich. I have found a rest for myself. Because of the iniquities which he hath committed, none of his labor shall turn to account. I, Yahweh, am your Aluah. I brought you up out of the land of Mitzrayim. I will yet cause you to dwell in tents as in the days of a festival. Shall I speak to prophets? Though I have multiplied visions and by the ministry of prophets made comparisons. Was it only because of Galaad? There were liars indeed at Galaad, chiefs sacrificing, but their altars were like heaps in an uncultivated field. Though Jacob fled to the plain of Syria, and Yashar made himself a slave for a wife, and for a wife kept watch, yet by a prophet Yahweh brought Yashar out of the land of Mitzrayim, and by a prophet he was preserved. Ephraim hath kindled indignation and provoked to wrath. His blood therefore shall be poured out on him, and Yahweh will retribute to him his reproach. That's it.
Boy, I can't help but bring up verse 8 in chapter 11. Boy, do we see the love of our Father. You know, it's like a father whose son has gone wayward, who's getting drunk and spending his money and doing everything the prodigal son did. And it's like, how can I give up on you? You know, I mean, we see incredible mercy, incredible love. I could not help but tear up when Joshua was reading that. How can I give up on you, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, Yashrael? We are so baraked with the love of our Father, unbelievable love.
Yeah.
And it really rings very, very clear on that. I want to ask one question, if you guys don't mind. I really want to understand what it means back in chapter 7 where it says, Ephraim is a flat cake not turned over. Does that mean not completed, not, what does that not turned over mean? Or what do we think it means?
Like, I think it has to do with inflamed and all that. It has to do with the drunkenness. I think who was talking about spiritual drunkenness or even physical drunkenness.
Mm-hmm.
Basically Ephraim is sinning like crazy, and so he's saying he's a hot cake turned.
Oh, so he's not turned back.
It's like a metaphor
Okay.
for that he will not repent.
I see.
That.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking. That's
It
what
just sat a little. I'm like, what? What does that mean?
that's the only thing that makes sense to me is that it's talking. It's referencing to his works, his fruit. And he's, Ephraim.
Yeah. If you're making a pancake and you don't turn it over, it's unfinished.
Yeah.
It's incomplete.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
right?
too.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure it out.
Because actually, tob, the Hebrew word for tob or tube, however you want to pronounce it, it means to be complete.
Okay.
So sin is being incomplete, like to negate or fall short from his Torah is to be incomplete in a way, allegorically or spiritually. It means to be not complete. So when it says, everything was told for day 1 to day 6, it doesn't just mean like righteously good, but it also means completeness.
Right.
So, yeah. Yep, go ahead, bro.
I think it's interesting as you read further on in chapter 7 where it says Ephraim is an unturned cake. It goes on to say foreigners consume his strength, but he does not notice. Even his hair is streaked with gray, but he does not know. I think just find that interesting because you have so many people today that are, just being led astray and they don't even realize it.
True. True.
I find it interesting that verse 15 of what was it, chapter 8 or chapter 9? Let me see here. Verse 15 in chapter 9 shows that hate the sin, not the sinner is completely unbiblical.
Oh, yes.
Verse 15 here literally says, I hate him or I hate them. So he's saying to he's talking about his own people even. In this point of time, he's so wrathful against them. He actually hates them. As if for there, I hated them because of the wickedness of their practices. So to hate the sin and not the sinner, they're directly connected to one another.
If you
Oh,
hate
yes.
someone's sin, then you hate them because their sin is what they
Mhm.
do.
Yeah, that's right.
It's part of their personality. So it's like it's almost like an oxymoron to say I hate what they do, but I don't hate them. Yeah, that's we've been fed this 70s hippie
Yeah, that's one of those
message.
little sweet feel good phrases
and that you can't hate the person though, you can hate what they do, but you can't. First of all, they're synonymous with one another according to that verse. It's synonymous. He hates his own people at that point in time because of what they're doing. So I mean, it's synonymous. But anyway, so I just thought that was interesting. Let's see. Elohim shall reject them because they have not hearkened to him. They shall be wanderers among the nations or Gentiles. And I like how the ISR here has a footnote here, Deuteronomy 28:36. So the ISR would agree with my assertion that this is fulfillment of prophecy from the curses of Deuteronomy 28. So I find that interesting. The treasury of scriptural knowledge gives that footnote there for verse 17, Deuteronomy 28, verse 36. So I think that's it. I think we can. I'm really torn whether I want to do a new recording or just keep it on here for Second Chronicles portion. But I think just to play it safe, I'll do a new recording for Second Chronicles. And then we just have the New Testament scriptures and then we're done. So we got a good pace going here. So
if you want a reference to that hate the sinner business, Psalm 5, 4, 6.
Yeah, a lot of times in the book of Psalms, David will literally talk about Yahuwah saying, no, he'll literally say about Yahuwah, I know you have hated the sinner. So there's
lots of Psalms here.
There's actually verses in Psalms that literally say that.
Mm-hmm. So good.
So we're gonna move on here. I think let's stop the live and the recording. We're gonna start a new one here. All right, so stay tuned.